firms and workers in Gresham, in Portland, in Beaverton, and yes, in Hermiston now compete and collaborate directly with their counterparts in Tokyo, London, and elsewhere. Clearly, in this age, a well-trained, highly educated workforce is essential. Schooling at its very best is the order of the day. How well are we providing that schooling? Here in Oregon, our school system is better than some. Yet 27%, more than 1 out of 4 of our children, fail to graduate from high school. Though other states have similar dropout rates, our 27% figure is simply unacceptable. For decades now, we have been struggling to develop adequate, stable funding for our schools. And now with Measure 5, that struggle is even more desperate. What about post-secondary education? On the positive side, University of Oregon and Oregon State provide research and educational services throughout the state. In the Portland Metropolitan Area, we have a diverse set of public and private institutions, some nationally recognized. There are new and enlightened leaders at many of those institutions, and we have a community college system here that ranks very high indeed in service per capita. But there's been no common vision and little coordination among the separate institutions in the Portland area. And compared to other metropolitan centers, our record, frankly, is poor. The Portland area is 10 percentage points below the national average in the number of bachelor degrees granted on a per capita basis. Only 61% of the national average for master's degrees, and a dismal 43% for doctoral degrees. For research grants, the Portland metropolitan area ranks at the bottom. So we have some real work to do. Where do we begin? Governor Neil Goldschmidt took a first step 18 months ago when he asked 11 people to form a commission on higher education in the Portland metropolitan area. He didn't get a single turnout. The commission's task has been stimulating and complex. It has been benefited enormously from an outstanding staff, the support of the governor's office, including Paul Bragdon, the governor's assistant for education, from the Board of Higher Education, the Business Council, the American Electronics Association Oregon chapter, and many others, including the Murdoch Foundation, the Meyer Memorial Trust, the Oregon Legislature, the Oregon Community Foundation, Apple Computer, and the Collins Foundation. Commission members believe this may be the most important civic responsibility we have ever assumed. Why? Because we strongly believe that Greater Portland cannot come out a winner in the 21st century unless it has globally competitive, integrated, and comprehensive post-secondary education for its citizenry. That is a tall order, to be sure. But in our view, if it can't be done in Portland, where can it be done? Here we are, a proud, aggressive, innovative community with caring, involved citizens. Here we are with manageable problems compared with the big city problems that plague the Los Angeleses, the New Yorks, and the Detroits of the world. Here we are, perfectly situated on the Pacific Rim for increased trade and business and educational exchanges with the expanding countries of East Asia. And here we are with some strong educational resources at our feet, just waiting to be linked up, leveraged, and directed to produce more effective results. To make the most of those resources, we must begin by looking at education in a new way, not as a process that occurs during one's school years, but as a lifelong journey, not as something that occurs in isolated institutions, but as something that is integral to this community's life, what the Commission envisions as a shared university. Education is the tool our companies need to better understand and compete in global markets. It is the resource that can help us address our complex social issues like drug addiction, crime, child abuse, homelessness, and poverty. It is the vehicle for increasing our capacity to guide urban growth and protect the quality of our environment. Education is the support we need so that whenever our offices and factories get retooled, as they must, we in the workforce can be reschooled. It is time to throw open the doors of our educational institutions to welcome in new participants through new partnerships. And it's not enough to educate and re-educate those who are naturally attracted to the system. We must reach out and draw in those who are dropping out of high school and staying out of college. Then there must be some excitement and relevance to what we're offering so they find reason to stick with it. For me, there's no question about it. This is my most important civic undertaking. Why? Because the stakes are so high for each one of us. This report, Working Together, shouts at the top of its voice some key matters. One, you and I must be more involved in higher education. Two, there are specific recommendations in this report which in combination can lead to achievements in post-secondary education here that will put us solidly on the world map as a world-class player in a world economy. What are the key elements of those recommendations? First, collaboration among the area's post-secondary institutions through a council of presidents involving joint academic programs and projects. Secondly, development of Portland State University as an urban grant university oriented to meet the specific needs of this particular metropolitan area. Thirdly, creation of a greater Portland trust in higher education to identify Portland metropolitan needs and priorities wherein academic collaboration can be helpful, and then to oversee and develop funding for such joint programs. And fourth, the creation of a Portland educational network to promote greater access to and more participation in higher education. Let me describe each of those components. First, increased collaboration among post-secondary institutions through a council of presidents involving joint projects and programs to take advantage of our existing higher education capabilities. This has already begun. The Council of Presidents was formed 1 year ago. It includes the presidents of PSU, Oregon Health Science University, Portland Community College, representing the 4 community colleges of the area, Reed College, Lewis and Clark, the University of Portland, Pacific University, representing the independent colleges, and the Oregon Graduate Institute of Science and Technology. Participating institutions will be added as individual projects are undertaken. Council's already made significant progress in defining a regional agenda. What does the agenda include? Development of an integrated regional research library, enhancement of a broad range of graduate programs, improved access for students, a coordinated program to provide community service, coordinated recruitment and retention of minority and underrepresented faculty, staff, and students. Our post-secondary institutions might work together to create a joint center for urban environment, a joint center for health policy and management, international education programs, programs in journalism and related fields, a center for Portland's children, an entrepreneurship support network, joint graduate schools of engineering already underway, improved programs for working adults, and so on. The list of possibilities seems almost endless. The Commission's second recommendation is the development of Portland State as an urban grant university. You are already familiar with the concept of a land grant university. Oregon State University was founded as such. Its original mission was to support and help meet specific needs of farmers and the mechanical arts. That university's extension service was set up as a first line of interaction between academic disciplines and Oregon's farmers. Developing Portland State as an urban grant university would parallel this kind of an approach, but it would focus on the specific social, cultural, economic, and environmental needs of Greater Portland, its environs, and its citizens. The distinctive challenge of the Urban Grant University would be to work with the Council of Presidents in drawing upon state, national, and worldwide intellectual resources to help this metropolitan area address its urban problems and take advantage of our opportunities. PSU would provide extension service to the community through joint applied research centers, using the Portland area as a living laboratory. This concept of an urban grant university could actually be a first of its kind. Although there are metropolitan universities, comprehensive urban universities, and other type of urban institutions in North America, the idea of a university focused on the distinct needs of its particular urban area is unique. What might this part of the curriculum address at a new PSU? How to make the most of our Pacific Rim location. How to balance economic growth and your and my environmental concerns. How to design regional economic strategies for the Pacific Northwest. How to develop responsive social and human services to assist families with children, displaced workers, and others. How to best respond to the special educational and research needs of high-tech and other area industries. Portland State's new president, Judith Ramaley, and her associates are already actively pursuing many of these goals. The Commission's third recommendation is creation of the Greater Portland Trust in higher education that can provide the link between elements of the metropolitan area and the Council of Presidents in identifying, prioritizing, and developing joint academic programs and projects oriented to our needs. The board of the trust would include citizen leaders representing educational, social, business, governmental, and cultural interests in the metropolitan area. The trust would also be charged with identifying sources for funding. I should note that we on the Commission intentionally avoided significant reliance on state funding for our plan, even though our crystal ball didn't foresee the passage of Measure 5. We recognize that state funds for higher education are very limited, and the current statewide priority must be to increase faculty salaries. It's interesting to note, however, that right now, out of $506 million expended by private and public institutions for post-secondary education in the Portland metropolitan area, only $101 million of that $506 million comes from the state. That's $1.05. Funding mainly comes from tuition and fees, then state appropriations, followed by grants and contracts, local appropriations, university enterprises, private gifts, and other sources. To finance the plan of projects and programs through the Council of Presidents for improving higher education, the Council has recommended a more diverse funding base, one which includes new funds for new programs and minimizes any adverse impact on the current funding sources of particular institutions. We believe that once joint academic programs and projects take shape, new financial resources can be forthcoming. Major regional and national foundations should be attracted to strong programs involving collaboration among the best educational talents in the region. Oregon cities should want to take advantage of these urban educational resources in meeting their problems. And federal agencies and national and international corporations with strong interests in the Pacific Northwest should want to contract for services when they see that their particular needs can be effectively addressed. 2 weeks ago, outgoing Governor Goldschmidt and his successor, Barbara Roberts, gave the Commission the go-ahead to begin setting up the trust. It is our hope that once that body is in place, it will assume the Commission's role of providing the necessary tension and glue to keep the components of this plan working together and moving along. On to our fourth recommendation, creation of a Portland educational network to increase access to and participation in higher education. There are currently a number of programs at various educational and social service institutions to help the high school dropout problem, welfare recipients, would-be entrepreneurs, displaced workers, young parents, and others to get educational services they need. But one of the more startling factors we uncovered in our work on the Commission is that there is no single area-wide system or organization that is encouraging and facilitating participation in the educational process from the earliest years through adulthood. This became clear during one of the meetings sponsored by the Commission involving representatives of the K through 12 systems, the area community colleges, and Portland State. I made a comment to them. I have a feeling that the only organized system we have for tracking any segment of our kids is the police. You know, they agreed. We cannot stand here and allow that to continue. The Portland Educational Network would pull together representatives from K through 12 systems in Greater Portland, our community colleges, PSU, independent colleges, the Metropolitan United Way, the Metropolitan Human Rights Commission, and a citizen representing the neighborhood associations to address these needs of coordination and integration. Other members could be added as necessary. The group might tackle such projects as increased availability of financial aid, improved provision of child care for student parents, collaboration among counselors working at all educational levels, strategies aimed at helping high school dropouts and high-risk students participate and succeed in the system, and so on. Only by joining forces can we place education within the reach of everyone and make equal employment opportunities a reality. These then are our four recommendations: to support the Council of Presidents and their joint programming among public and private institutions, to develop PSU as an urban grant university, to create a trust to oversee joint programming and pursue funding sources, and to establish a Portland educational network to reach out to those who need help in participating and succeeding in our educational system. The question now is, how can we spread the word and create the community support and involvement we need for these ideas to really work? That's where the City Club can be a key. It's no accident that the City Club is the Commission's first public audience to receive our formal report. The City Club in the past has done 3 studies on higher education in the metropolitan area. In fact, those studies were important reference documents for this Commission. Now, I ask you to read the report. I hope you'll endorse it. I encourage you to invite speakers from higher education and the legislature to address this group in the future regarding progress on the Commission's recommendations. Help us keep this issue alive. I want the City Club to be the conscience of higher education in the metropolitan area. The conscience of the Commission's report. What other organization is closer to being the conscience of this community? Our report is a strong foundation. It is real. Some of its recommendations are already a reality. We need the City Club to persist in helping to keep the community's attention focused on building from this foundation. Your ideas, suggestions, and yes, your involvement are essential. Henry David Thoreau once said, "If you build castles in the air, your work need not be lost." That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Here is the beginning of a dream. Here is a plan. Here, if we choose, is our future. It is a solid foundation based on a compelling need and a community vision. Let's build on this foundation. Let's do it working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Marge Abbott has the privilege of the first question. Marge?
Thank you, Don. You've certainly done an excellent job giving us a broad overview. I'd like to start off by asking a question about what's been one of the most controversial specific programs. You had mentioned the potential for major foundations, corporations, and a number of other potential sources of new funds for jointly sponsored programs to supplement the existing state funds and tuition revenues. Given the probable impact of Measure 5 on all state-funded programs, what do you suggest is the most cost-effective strategy for the expansion of the technical and engineering education in the Portland area?
I really thought you and I had established a nice relationship up here. The question of providing adequate engineering capabilities, particularly in the graduate arena in the Portland Metropolitan Area, has had a long history, as you well know. It goes back to the Mark Hatfield days and even more deeper than that. And out of the Mark Hatfield days really came a privately sponsored organization called the Oregon Graduate Center, now OGI. The governor was particularly interested in our addressing the question of engineering, advanced engineering, to support the high-tech industries that are in the Portland metropolitan area. And obviously those high-tech industries cannot survive in this competitive world unless they have the underpinnings of excellent graduate programs for their key people and for the development of their key people. The commission really tried to avoid that issue in some respects because we didn't feel that we had the time or the capabilities to fully explore that very dominant need. As a consequence, the chancellor set up a committee at the urging of the governor, and the chancellor was more than willing to be urged, of a group of academics and industry people out primarily in the Beaverton, Washington County area. And out of that came a report and a suggestion of a high-tech electrical, electronic engineering, computer science-oriented facility to be located in the Washington County area. That was a subject of a commission meeting where we heard the views of probably 8 or 9 key organizations, all in the various engineering disciplines. And the concern quickly came to the surface, which was if you start a major facility out in Washington County to meet the needs of that particular high-tech area, you may be setting a precedent to have the whole complex of engineering needs in the civil and mechanical and environmental engineering and the whole range of engineering disciplines ultimately there. And where most of them are needed is in the downtown metropolitan area. So as a consequence, there was a subsequent meeting held that was supposed to go on for several meetings, but a group of the top business technologists and several of the educational people took a look at that first report and came out with something the commission has now endorsed, which, among other things, calls for a joint graduate group comprised of the presidents of each of the major institutions having engineering courses, namely OSU, University of Oregon, Portland State, and OGI, and their counterparts in industry, representing the key engineering companies in the various disciplines, plus a chairman. The report, in effect, recommended a program to get our educational capabilities in the graduate arena up to the top 15% level in the country. Let's not fool around. Let's shoot for quality, because that's the only way to play. It calls for expenditures on the part of the legislature of $100 million over the next 10 to 15 years. Now, that 100 million figure, when you break it down biennium, becomes manageable. Not very manageable with Measure 5, but let's take a leap over Measure 5 for a moment. Very manageable in the long-term aspects of this program. The first step would be a high-tech capability to meet the computer science and related fields, primarily out in the Washington County area. The second step would involve civil and mechanical, and then ultimately the other engineering fields that are emerging, such as environmental engineering. It was agreed that the latter ones should all be located in the Portland metropolitan area. The former one could be located either out in a distance from Portland or in Portland, and that a council of an engineering council should be formed to make that determination. So we got over that rough spot, and now the only rough spot is the one that you raise. Where do you get the money? The need is there. There's no question about it. If we're going to continue to be a factor in the technical fields that we are now, we have to have that graduate support.
John Canelon, member of the Education Standing Committee, has the privilege of the second question. John?
Yes, Mr. Frisbee. High technology may provide some of the funding for the science and technology programs you just mentioned. But how do the recommendations of this report produce any new graduate level programs in non-science fields, such as the liberal arts, urban studies, etc.? We're asking, what evidence is there that the private sector will pick up the funds and produce the funds necessary for the implementation of this report, unless they are willing to take the profits which they'll make out of the passage of Proposition 5 and devote all of that funding to higher education?
That's a nice idea. Let me just say that the glue that will hold this whole companion of structures together clearly is, one, money, and secondly, outstanding graduate programs that the various institutions in the Portland Metropolitan Area can have access to. So your question is right on. In terms of the kind of graduate programs, doctoral programs, research programs that ought to be emphasized, I think it's very clear in this report that we're talking about those that relate to this urban area. Now, that doesn't block out a lot of things that you might think it might block out. It certainly doesn't block out the liberal arts. The liberal arts is basic to everything we do. But it does say a PhD program in Greek anthropology, if there is such a thing, doesn't fit at Portland State. Whereas concerns about our environment, concerns about city problems, concerns about the social, economic, and cultural aspects of this particular community ought to be emphasized in terms of graduate work. We shouldn't copy. We shouldn't copy just for the sake of duplication and prestige programs that are available at OSU or U of O. How do we finance those against Measure 5? We probably don't. We probably don't. How do we ultimately get interest on the part of business and other foundations outside the region in some of these programs? We do it by starting off with some programs that are fundable here and showing the world what they can do and what they can mean to the community. And then we sell that on a broader basis to other institutions, other companies that have some interests here. But we've got to prove ourselves first. You can't just strike out there and expect people to spark to the idea until we have shown the idea works and works well.
I'm Gus Mattersdorf. I appreciate your report and all the contents in it, your plans, your ambitions, the organization that you're thinking about. I don't know that anybody in this room would disagree with anything that you have told us. That's kind of refreshing to have a kind of a pep talk for us on this topic. Could you tell us, though, what arguments, what debates you have had in coming to these conclusions, what the sticking points were, where people disagreed about it, so that we can have some kind of a sense of the discussion that went on?
You want me to bare my soul and the Commission's soul? A lot of sticking points, but interestingly, nothing insurmountable. I think probably the biggest sticking point is the trust. And I hear some of you chuckling a little bit. The trust has got to operate somehow so that it does not step on the toes of funding sources that institutions in the Portland Metropolitan Area are now relying on. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. We've got, in effect, to be talking about new sources of funds. Now, that doesn't mean you don't go to some foundation that has been feeding some of our outstanding institutions in Portland. But you don't go to them in a way that in any way blocks the Reed or the Lewis and Clark or the Portland State University from going to them for their particular needs. You play in your ball game, not their ball game. How do you avoid going to Salem and competing for funds against the Board of Higher Education? We are pledged to a program that in effect would feed in to the Board of Higher Education's already existing methodology for reaching Salem and the legislature. And those ideas would be fed, those needs would be fed in through Oregon Health Science University and Portland State University through their regular budgetary processes. That was one sticking point. I think another sticking point was we kept saying, because we were new to the game, innocent, that we didn't feel there was a system of higher education in the Portland Metropolitan Area. And from our standpoint, we were talking about system in a Webster dictionary term. But every time we used that word, it just raised hackles to anyone who was a part of the system, capital S. So that was something we had to learn about. That was something we had to sort of back away from and find other ways to express what we were trying to express. I think the Council of Presidents was not a sticking point, except that, as always, initially as it was formed, it consisted of 7 bodies, and we urged that the community colleges have some representation. And then, you know, there are 31 institutions of higher education in the Portland Metropolitan Area, 31. There are 8 on the Council of Presidents. How do you think those other 23 feel? So that's a tough one. And that's being addressed by the Council of Presidents right now. And certainly there's no attempt to exclude anyone. And as projects develop, as programs move forward, the resources of all 31 of those institutions and downstate institutions, OSU and U of O, will be sought. So this is not a closed club. This is an open club. But I think more than anything else, there are perceptions that we've had to work through, and there are perceptions we'll have to continue to work through.
My name is Scott Conyers. I'm a City Club member. What you've presented here today sounds quite good to this highly educated crowd. But I guess I would maintain that the educations that are typical here and the educations typical on the Commission are inappropriate for a majority of Portlanders and a majority of the jobs that we have in Portland. I'm wondering, did you analyze the perhaps German education system that balances technical and professional, and how did that enter into your thinking?
We did look at some of those European systems where at an early age kids in effect are either moved into more vocationally oriented education programs, or others in more of a liberal arts professional orientation. In effect, our system, it seemed to us, reflects that to a degree already, individually in the high school experience, and then as you move on to the community college, where there's a high degree of orientation toward vocational. The thing that amazed me was to learn that right now today, there are 130,000 young people and adults involved in the community college programs among the 4 community colleges serving the metropolitan area. And that in itself, it seemed to me, as an impressive counter-argument to the idea that we ought to adopt a German system or an English system or whatever in order to make that separation. It seemed to me, except for the dropouts, except for those who don't move on, the system is working pretty well in that regard. And that what we have to focus on is, why are these kids dropping out? How can we get them in? And how can we continue to push them along the educational path in this highly technical, fast-moving, small world kind of an economy?
I'm Dick Ritz, a member. I'm wondering if the Commission discussed the value of a high-speed rapid transit system connecting the 3 major universities, Portland, Corvallis, and Eugene, and what that might do for forwarding your program.
Dick, a very interesting question to me. We jokingly said several times during the course of our meetings, maybe we ought to just junk this whole program and make a pitch for a 200-mile-an-hour rail system between Corvallis, Eugene, and Portland, and extend it on up to the University of Washington, which has huge resources. And man alive, you know, that's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. The thing I don't like about it, however, is it puts us at the mercy of them. It puts us at the mercy of them. Now, when you think about the presidents of those institutions that would be feeding these people in, where are their priorities? Where do their priorities have to be? It seems to me they have to be toward their own institutions, number one. And until there's an incentive for them, a real incentive for them, to get aboard that 200-mile-an-hour train and get up here and teach a class and go home in the afternoon, I don't think the system will work. But I sure like the idea.
Mary McWilliams, City Club member. I like the idea of the vision of the shared university and the kind of inter-institutional programs that may occur, but I have a concern about faculty. And given faculty's traditional orientation more to their own department or discipline than to their institution, and a tenure system that rewards them for activity in their own department and their own institution, how can we mobilize the support and involvement of faculty in this kind of shared university?
There's a one-word answer to that, and I think I'll use it: money. And I think money becomes very key in that regard. If you can begin stretching people and getting people to open their eyes to the fact that, oh, that's where the money is, that's where the emphasis is, that's where the attention is, I think we can begin shifting focus. Now, Judith Romele has a huge job in that regard, and the various institutions in the Portland Metropolitan Area, the others, have a continuing huge job. That is the challenge of higher ed, right there. Being able to focus on the things that are important today and hang on to the traditional things that are necessary for today. And that's what leadership is all about. And you put your finger right on it.
Member, I like your report, and it's very helpful, I think, from strictly a metropolitan point of view. The problem is, at least in your remarks, you haven't addressed the relationship with the rest of the state. To follow up with Dick Ritz's comment, isn't it time that we start thinking about the relationship between Portland and the rest of the state and what trade-offs we have to make? First of all, you've talked about an urban grant university. That means that we have a land grant university at Oregon State. What role does the University of Oregon play? What role should Monmouth play? What role should LeGrand play? Isn't it time that we start analyzing our resources in order to apply them more appropriately for the 21st century?
Well, I think the report basically tries to do that. It tries to give Portland State a distinctive role that it has never had before. If you read the present mission of Portland State, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily even in Portland, Oregon. If you read the mission of the University of Oregon, I think you can conclude that it really doesn't matter whether that institution is physically located in Eugene or Podunk. And I say that because basically it's internal. Its orientation is internal. If you look at Oregon State University, it has to be in Oregon. It's dealing with Oregon's resources, human and raw materials. Now, when you get to this institution, we're trying to give it a very distinctive mission, this Portland Metropolitan Area. And I think the report really clarifies the orientation of those three institutions, but in no way does it say the three never speak to one another. In effect, it calls for sharing. I think the engineering approach that the report recommends as a consequence of those meetings I described to you is a model. It's a model for journalism, where we have outstanding journalism capabilities at Eugene. We've got to somehow get them into the Portland area, but you're not going to reinvent the wheel there. You're going to use those resources. You're going to find a way to use those resources here. The same is very much true in architecture, where we do not have a major architectural institution as yet, and Eugene does. We've got to share in those capabilities. So it's a combination, it seems to me, of recognizing the distinctive differences between the three institutions, and at the same time effectively utilizing resources from each for the benefit of all. Not a very good answer, but we believe it. I think it's clear.
Kitty Wheeler, City Club member. I commend all of you on your report. However, I'm a little bit concerned about one of the circles that I feel is frankly shortchanged, and that is Penn. And I think if we don't begin to educate our children from kindergarten through, hopefully, 12th grade, where are we in advanced degrees, much less community colleges? And I have not read your report. I look forward to doing it. But I would like to know if you have taken a hard look at things like mentorships, where small businesses and large would adopt schools, even primary schools. And how do you propose to create this council or whatever you were suggesting? I feel we've got to start with K through 12.
Yes, and although that was not our assignment, we fell into it just like you have identified. You can't help but fall into K through 12, and then you can't help but get into pre-K through 12, and then you can't help but get into prenatal. Very clear, the thing just starts way back there somewhere. And then you've got to get into parental education and the whole bit. I think the K through 12, we did not dedicate the time and attention that you would have liked to have seen us do, simply because we ran out of time, and it was not really a part of our basic mission as outlined by the governor, Paul Bragdon, the chancellor, and others. But we did call for the establishment of a council, a Portland educational network, to deal with that K through 12 problem, to be comprised of the key elements of this community that are in their own way working with segments of the problem today. Get them together, get them together, get them thinking aloud together, and get them working on a more coordinated basis. I was frankly appalled when I just began poking a little bit at our counseling system. There is not a consistent counseling, educational background, use of materials, interaction among counselors as you move from school to school and as you move from K through 12 into the community colleges and on to PSU. That ought to be one of the finest integrated, interactive, intercommunicative group of people in this community, all understanding the full scope of opportunities for kids, all holding up that dream at an early age that a kid might latch on to and be able to generate the interest and enthusiasm to stick with it through the process. We don't have that yet. And I hope out of this network, the Penn network, that might evolve.
Last question.
Dennis Cusack, City Club member. The system or the strategy that you've outlined demands a lot of things. Money obviously is one of them, but it seems to me that it demands more than anything else cooperation and collaboration amongst a large group of institutions. Are there other models, other metropolitan areas, other states in this country where that has been tried and hopefully worked?
Probably the best example of what we ultimately might strive for is in Toronto, Canada, where the University of Toronto, having begun a direction at the turn of the century, now is comprised of public and private institutions throughout a broad metropolitan area, all under the banner of the University of Toronto. A formidable example for us to say, ultimately, maybe we could get there in some form, shape, or other. The Claremont colleges would be an example of private institutions that have banded together. There are at least two in the state of Massachusetts, one consisting of public and private institutions that band together where there's articulation so students can get credits at any one of those institutions, joint professorships, in some cases a common calendar. And there are others around the country. In a sense, each is unique simply because each has a unique set of institutions and a unique set of problems and challenges. I just want to say this is a marvelous audience. I hope you'll ask me back.
We are adjourned.